Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this session about facial rigging for stylized character animation. I wrote in parentheses on the top a very particular way of facial rigging, since facial rigging is a very multifaceted topic. There are many school of thoughts about how to do facial rigging, but also there are many purposes for facial rigging when you're rigging for either games, for movies, for VR, or real-time rigging. So, and especially if it comes from a non-rigger. I'm actually a more arrogant animator, I would say, where I come from the perspective of using rigs and curious about how it's made and how some of the rigging techniques we can use in Blender. Of course, facial rigs can consist of many different features, bones, shape keys. I've even seen fully facial rigs done with geometry nodes. Super exciting. I think there are a bunch of talks about node-based rigging at the conference, which I'm very excited to attend as well. Next to that, I will go over the character that we are currently developing at the Blender Studio, called Storm. It's the facial rig and that I have been made, where I will show some of the solutions I chose to implement. The facial rigging, this particular way of facial rigging is very conventional, I would say. And how I got there, I will talk a little bit about my own background and how I came until this point. So just to give you a brief summary of this session, do a little bit of a background check. Who am I? What did I do to get here? Just a brief contextual overview of approaches to facial rigging. Introducing the studio character asset Storm. Talk a bit about the tools and workflow. Then we'll dive into Blender and show the rig and its facial features, and talk about control widgets as well, and ultimately what is next. Okay, so come on. Next. Come on. All right, never mind. Let me just try that again. Okay, so I've been working in the animation industry as an animator by trade for over 10 years. I started working on The Little Vampire, which was back in 2015, the very first Dutch animation production where we were very proud of pulling off a 3D animated movie. Small budget, and I worked on a couple of European productions. After that, in 2017, I got hired by Sony Imageworks, where I started working on Smallfoot, Vivo, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. My time at Sony was I learned a lot about their pipeline, about how they create their characters, and particularly on Vivo, where I was the first animator hired on the show, which means that the pre-production phase was still ongoing. So there was a lot of rig testing, giving rigging feedback to the rigging department to get the main characters ready for production. And that was a very a big learning experience in that regard. And after 2020, when COVID hit, me and my family decided to move back to the Netherlands, where I'm from. But I still wanted to animate and work in an environment where high quality animation is the target. And in the Netherlands, there's not a lot, but the Blender Studio was actually one of the places where I found a very high goal for quality animation, but also the innovative part of tool development. So that was a a great jump into. But I never worked with Blender beforehand. I actually worked all my life in Autodesk Maya. So I started on Sprite Fright, and next to that I was also teaching at Anim School doing a facial animation course. So along that journey there was a lot of facial animation involved, and with all of these productions up till working at Blender, one thing that stood out to me is that all of these stylized animations use a lot of shape keys, blend shapes, and when I started working at Blender, it was a very unique aspect of Blender rigging, which is called bendy bones, and that was something that I wasn't used to, but I wanted to explore facial rigging after I started working at Sony, but also doing the animation facial course at Anim School. So we jump into a brief overview of very different ways of rigging, and this comes down to there's not a good or a bad way of rigging. There's facial rigging. It's really about the purpose of what do we try to achieve. Whereas for the movie Wing It, where you see the dog, it was a very curve-oriented workflow, which really served a different purpose than if you work with, for example, very realistic characters, where shape keys might be more heavy, a heavy part of the workflow. So for me, it was during this period, I felt like I wanted to implement a workflow where shape keys were the basis of the facial rig. Since I've been involved in some facial rigging courses where shape keys were a big part of the rigging process, and mainly because shape keys were very suitable for art direction in big studios. So there, I became a little bit of an activist for shape keys, and I made this whole diagram, or like where I pointed out which shape keys and how I wanted to make the facial rig. But I soon found out that using only shape keys, it comes with its limitations, and talking to a bunch of riggers, modelers in the industry, I noticed that there's never a facial rig that only uses one type of rigging, and where shape keys are part of a system. It's usually a hybrid system where both curves, joint deformers, and shape keys are combined. So I had to pedal back a little bit and wanted to implement this into this new character where both shape keys, but also bone deformers and additional other deformers were implemented. So I'm going to show you a quick video of the process, showing the design process of Storm, where the concept and design is done by Vivian Lukowski, modeling by Julian Casper, shading by Simon Thomas, and the body rigging actually done by Demeter Tzadik. So without... Oh, we don't have audio. Hold on. Is it only... I gotta sing it, yeah. Nope. That's a little sad. Well, there's very cool music underneath it, okay? I'll talk a bit over it. So the concept sculpting, and then ultimately the character. Anyway. Yep. I went fully out of it. All right. So, yep, Storm is currently almost done. Still work in progress. And its main purpose was to be a proof of concept where these rigging methods of heavily based on shape keys were implemented and see how that works within the Blender pipeline. And some additional tool development happened from the developers where shape key management, shape key operators were added to accommodate the workflow. And for me, it was an extra excuse to learn about facial rigging. Now, Storm's facial rig setup, I wanted to hit a few targets and a few properties where it consists of a hybrid of bones, ribbon guides, and we'll jump into each feature separately, and shape keys. I wanted, like, the overarching perspective here is I wanted to make this rig from an animator's perspective. I wanted to be quick and intuitive to pose, especially for stylized character animation. Design and staying on model is very important. And the less time I have to spend on tweaking a pose, I can spend way more time actually thinking about motion and thinking about the performance itself. But next to that, also have the detailed controls for polishing. Ultimately, this is not the case right now. It's a very custom-made rig. But the setup should be partially generatable and scalable for bigger productions. Performance efficient, being real time, and fun to animate. So let's talk a little bit about tools and workflow. KISS, oh yeah, I've wrote that down. KISS, not the band. It's really about keep it simple, stupid. Try to be straightforward with solutions. And there's a little bit of geometry nodes involved, but it's very minimal. Also because my lack of geometry nodes, but also the fluctuation of the development of geometry nodes. I want to be, quite straightforward. One add-on that I use heavily, which I'm very happy and excited to show you guys, is the Pose Shape Keys add-on made by Demeter. This is an add-on where you start with making an action. I can show you in a bit. Let me not talk about it. The Easy Weights add-on, also made by Demeter. Thank you, Demeter. You're amazing. Just a quality of life improvements on weight painting. And then some geometry nodes for automatic live linking shape keys for the brows and the cheeks. And then on top of that, I did a bit of sketchy Python scripting just to automate some parts of the updating that actually developers took over and properly implemented as operators for the shape key module. Okay, so here is a video where I briefly want to show the Pose Shape Keys add-on, which is a big part and a big help for creating additional corrective shapes. So here what you see is it's going a little bit fast, one sec. I created a new action where the eyebrows are moving down, and when naming the action, you see here on the right side, let me actually, oh, that's not great. One sec. Here we go. So on the right side, yep, That's the action, create the action. And both of those main eyebrow widgets have keys. And on the right side, next to shape keys, there are pose shape keys. And creating a new pose shape key, like that, you will assign the action, and it will automatically detect the right action. And sending a pose, it already is on the right frame. And while overriding the mesh, it will create a duplicate of the mesh in its current pose. And there you can add your adjustments, your correctives. Again, this corrective is only to demonstrate. It's not a very elegant shape. But with those adjustments, I can go back into the pose shape key and add new target shape keys. And this is where the actual shape keys native to Blender will be created. I only need to make one shape key, and being able to use the right side and the left side on the face, it needs to normalize the actual shapes, and then it will be added as two separate shape keys. Now this is, I'm skipping over a little bit fast. What you see here, which is I find super helpful, is those little arrows are actually auto-initializing drivers. So it takes a look at the action, that target shape, the target pose, and automatically assigns a driver to it, and that also respects the left side and the right side with the proper suffixes. So you can see here, it will detect the position of those controls. And now when moving up and down, the corrective has been activated by the actual, the pose shape keys. So talking about the mouth. The mouth consists of deformed bones as a base, like the jaw. It uses a lip ribbon guide, and this is where I initially wanted it to be fully shape keys, but I found it to lacking, it lacked a lot of, like flexibility basically. And with the lip ribbon guide, I was able to make a lip zipper, and on top of the lip ribbon guide, the pose space deformers that were created with the pose shape key add-on. And additionally, some mouth squash as well. Teeth and tongue controls, those are pretty straightforward. Before going into the mouth, I wanted to give a little bit of a principle theory about how to treat the mouth and also the eye, where the weight distribution is using the 3-curve principle. It's a football shape where the corners are having a very sharp fall off, while the middle and the left and right side have their own fall off, and they overlap each other in a linear way where you keep those corners very nice and sharp. It allows us to maintain very clean shapes with only weight distribution. And this is a principle both applied to the mouth as well as the eyes. And adding controls like that, you can already see a little bit on how that would work. So we'll dive into a Blender right now, taking a look at the character. So the mouth rig itself, as I'm opening the mouth here, you can already see it keeps that football shape, and it allows us to maintain very clean curves like that. And let me also, there we go. So here we see the ribbon guide. And when I'm also turning on the bones here, this guide is, it's a bit light, but is using that principle. So if I move this up and down, you will see that all those bones are pointing towards separate vertex groups that only consist of one vertex, and the corners similarly. And you see with the three-curve principle, you get quite clean shapes right out of the gate. And that is a base for how we set up the mouth. And the weights are then redistributed over smaller bones, where we can use more local bones, up to actual per edge loop bones, where we can use, and these are actually not attached to the actual curve, but these are directly moving the mesh itself. So right here. So from very global controls, you can move the whole upper and lower lip, and even have the ability to move the whole mouth, the lips around. You can scale down to local and to micro bones like that. And all of these are basically stretch two bones that are stretching to that ribbon guide that is the main shape definer of the mouth. And additionally, if I move this corner down, you will see that it's creating deformations that are activated by those corrective shape keys. So moving in and out will create nice deformations. And as an animator, I don't need to worry about, well, most of the time don't worry about the skin deformation. On top of that, there's the lip zipper, where we're able to, and it's also a quite simple setup where it uses the upper vertex and the lower vertex of the ribbon, and basically blends between the original point towards the middle of the mouth. Just as a caveat, so this is not a how to rig a character in 50 minutes. It is really like I'm trying to briefly point some of these features. The plan is to make a full facial rigging course on the studio.blender.org website. But for now, yeah, this is just a brief overview on how this works. So additionally to the mouth, there are yep, there we go. So let's pull these out, the teeth controls, and they should come with some additional bones that are not visible, but they come with a lattice deformer as well in order to manipulate and deform the teeth as well. So the base of the mouth, as I said, is the ribbon guide, and on top of that, if I close the mouth here, on top of that, you will see those post shape key deformers at play, where some volume retention has been baked in, and additionally some lip roll has been implemented as well, and those are all additional shape keys on top of that main ribbon structure. Okay, so let's talk about the eyes. It's similar to the mouth setup. It uses that curve principle. There's an auto blink feature that allows the animator to, just with one control, using a blink and being able to control the blink height. There's some eyelids follow control, highlight control. Okay, so switching to the eyes here. Okay. So if I go into wireframe mode, you will see a similar setup as to how the mouth has been set up, except that these bones are not a stretch 2 bone. These bones are actually using a damp track constraint, and that allows us to, when I move this up and down, that these bones are staying at the same length. So no matter where I move these bones, you can actually see the ribbon here that is stretching, but because of the bones having a static length, they won't move away from the eye. So there's the main bone, and then you have those smaller bones where you can manipulate more local areas. And it comes with all the control of doing rotation, scale, and translation. And that's the flexibility that I was looking for beyond only using shape keys. And eyes are particularly meant to be set up with bones. So when we rotate the eye around, there's some automatic follow, and that can be, I think it's right here. No, it's not. It's right here in the auto blink. So there's an auto blink. It's just a up and down slider, and that can also determine the height of the blink. When you move your eye in a certain, and of course when the auto blink is on, when I post the eye in a certain way, technically it should still blink to that middle point. Now, the auto blink works a bit differently than the lip zipper, because the auto blink is actually using a separate guide. And let me show you this. There we go. It's a bit hard to see like this, but it basically uses a blend shape from the upper lip to the lower lip, where the individual bones are pointing towards. So when using the blink height, you will actually see that those shape keys being activated from the lower to the upper lid. Then there's the highlight control. You can scale them up and down. And for the eyes, there is an eye target here. It's pretty straightforward. But there's also the ability to scale the eyes, and with this shrink wrap modifier, maintaining the circular or the spherical volume. And moving it in and out, you have the dial of the pupil itself. Okay. So going for the cheeks and brows, as I mentioned, like the ribbon guide is a big feature for the mouth and the eyes. For the cheeks and brows, I went for a more conventional, like classic shape key approach, where it is very shape key based, but it uses a linking shape keys with geonodes set up. And on top of that, there is a secondary bone deformation to tweak small adjustments. Okay, so let's take a look at the brows here. And let me actually go into, there we go, just to get a bit of, so just to give a bit of context on how the brows are set up. For each direction, there is a separate shape key. So up and down, you get your shape keys like that. There's the in and out, and let me turn on that. And then on top of that, there is some additional rotation going on. Now, those are the main shapes that are created. And with those main shapes, these main shapes are the basis of the local shapes, which are basically split into smaller shapes where you can move the inner and outer part. And on top of that, there are the local bones, which are actually deform bones to really tweak smaller sections of the brow to get the full range of broad shapes towards really tweaking and polishing your shapes. Now, how is that set up? Here we see the armature deforms, and for each one of them, X, Y, Z, positive and negative, it uses a separate shape. And the reason for that is because of the complexity of the skull. I wanted to design each shape with their own weights. So there's no sculpting involved in this part. It's really about moving the shapes towards a place, to the target that is designed with only using weight painting. And one of them is, for example, the brow down, where I really wanted to create a flat line, and then when going up, creating more of an arc. These shapes are also using a, these shapes are also using a shrink wrap modifier, and it uses the base skull in order to maintain the volume of the skull, so you get a little bit of that sliding along the skull effect to it. Now, these are the main shapes, and they will be then exported into only the left side. So only the left side here. And that's where we can do a little bit of tweaking on the actual shape keys. So on top of that, we can do a little bit of cleanup. And then these shapes will be added as the main shapes to the character. But to get the local shapes, we go into this part. And it's splitting the weights using a switch. Now, what is a switch? It basically has all the separate directions in there, and it splits the weights into the inner bone, the middle bone, and the outer local bone. So as you can see here, it automatically transfers those local weights over into those separate parts. So these guys are using a geometry, very simple geometry nodes system where it live updates the deformation of that switch. And that's where we export those into smaller chunks, where the inner part has been deformed, and those shapes are then exported or like added to the rig. Now I use, as I said, I'm using, from the beginning I was using my own sketchy Python script in order to update these automatically. But there are some new operators in the shape key system where I can update from selected objects and some flipping. I think there is currently a patch where you can also update the mirrored version, which is very important since we're only building one side. When your character is symmetrical, you should be able to automatically update for both sides. That's how technically, yeah, like the brows are set up. And another important thing for the brows, as well as the mouth corners, is that I separated and locked the Z-axis. So the animator can easily move it up and down, but there is no Z direction being activated going quickly off model. The same goes with the mouth. I can easily drag it along and it will stay within the directions without using that Z factor. However, sometimes you do want to move that in and out, and that's been distributed by a separate bone where we're able to move the, and that activates the Y direction of the actual brows. So it's a quality of life that I saw a lot working at Sony ImageWorks, where they wanted to make it a little bit more foolproof for the animator and quickly able to pose them like that. Okay, so similarly, I'm not going over that in detail, but that's also how the cheeks are being set up, as you can see here. It's a temporary armature, and all of these shapes are not ultimately included in the rig, since they will be baked down as shape keys. But it's a temporary armature setup where we use those same switch and redistribute them over those local shapes. Let's see how that works. So moving this around, you can see that some of those shapes are, for example, going inwards. I wanted to enhance that crease a little bit, and that's done with those separate shapes as well. Now, on top of that, I also implemented rotation and scale. That is, we'll get to that in a minute, because by default, shape keys are only activated with transform, like a location. All right. Okay, so going into additional deformers, there are the global face deformers. We add some squash and stretch and additional lattices on top of that. So if I go to the main rig here, there's a couple of poses. So for there's the, wait a minute. Yeah. So there's the ability to only pose the upper side of the face and the lower side. And both of them have a squash control that is that will add a bit of fleshiness when you're animating and you want to add that to it. For the mouth, I forgot to say that going up and down, there's a little bit of that as well. It's just small, little presence for the animator to play with, and you're able to turn it off and on based on if you want to add that in your animation or not. So what we're looking at here for the lower cheeks, or the cheek puff control, is that on one axis, it's actually using a shape key. So this is a shape. Let me close the mouth here. But on the other axis, it's taking over by the lattice itself. So in that way, we can combine lattice deformers, but using a shape key for a certain direction. And that same principle is going on for the cheeks, where its primary shapes are being made by the shape keys, but when I start rotating, it's actually using the lattice deform. How that has been set up, we'll not go into the technical details, but the facial rigging course will elaborate on that. So yeah, there's the upper one, it's the lower one, and it's always the question, how much squash and stretch does a character need? And then that's very particular for the style of show you're working on. I try to keep it relatively contained, but still you have quite a bit of flexibility going on there. So for the control widgets, there is something called override transforms. And the control combinations, we'll get into that. Just to give a bit of an explanation on how that works, if we look at a shape key, and the shape key has been made by the artist, it results obviously in a mesh deform. But that mesh deform, you want the control widgets or the bones to follow the mesh with either a vertex constraint. But once you want to use that bone also to drive the shape key again you get into a dependency cycle. And the solution right now in Blender is to use the override transform, where you use a separate bone that's not attached to the mesh, but it uses the visual location and the visual override of that bone that is actually attached to the mesh. And that causes, that basically breaks that dependency cycle. And there are some updates been made. And let me see if I can show you. So for example, if I move the brow up and down, so in the bone property tab, there's the override transform. And if I turn off the effect gizmo, you will see that the shape key does not update the gizmo updated position. And this is a updated feature that allows us to draw the gizmo right at the place where the bone is located. Additionally, there is a temp switch, and what that does, because if I turn off rotation, for example, it will actually rotate from its original position. But with the temp switch, and again, I think the naming is still work in progress, turning that on, it uses magic under the hood where I can now actually rotate from the local position of the bone. And it's kind of doing that. Oh, I know what's going on, because under the hood this bone is actually, let me try it with this guy. Yeah, so it's actually rotating in that local space, even though if I turn this off, you see the original position is actually over here. So in that way you can combine the visual transform as a local transform on bones that are driven by shape keys. And this becomes very handy when we are combining shape keys with deformation, where the bones are, no matter how much you deform the face or add additional shape keys, they will always come along with the deformation of the mesh itself. So that's pretty cool. Christoph, are you in the room right now? He's not, but Christoph made this happen, and he's amazing. Thank you. Okay. What is next? Now, for the Storm character asset, this will be released with Blender 5.0, since it has these new updates for override transforms in November. And additionally, that's what I said. Additionally, the plan is to create a facial rigging course on studio.blender.org that goes over these steps, and additional to that, some proper documentation on these features as well. I would love to work on actually rig generation regarding this setup, where I think a lot of these pointer bones and eye setups are generatable, and that way it will scale easily into bigger productions where characters can be partially automated, like facial rigging. Then there is the whole topic of geometry nodes hair simulation based on animated input. Right now, the hair, it is animatable. You can use simple FK bones in order to manipulate the hair. But Lucas Thornton, he will give a talk later in this conference about the progress on hair simulation. But the goal is to combine, or like have hair simulation based on animated input, and that would be really cool. And that was the talk. So thank you very much. There's still some room for questions. Keep in mind, I'm an animator, but go ahead. Yeah.
I have a question in regards to action constraints. Is there a specific reason that you didn't talk about action constraints in this setup? Are they included? And,
I've been thinking about it. This is merely my lack of experience into using action constraints. Yes, I will repeat the question into the microphone. Thank you. The question is, what about action constraints, and why is it not, and that is not incorporated in this rig? Yeah, I don't have enough experience to give you a proper answer on that, but for me it wasn't needed yet until with the flexibility that I got out of the rig without action constraints. So, yeah.
Okay, and then I had a quick second question in regards to the override of the rotation, or the temp switch, I think. How does that reflect in the graph editor when you are?
Yeah, that's a good question. That is a trade-off, I have to say, because it uses it uses the values of its local position. So you will end up with interpolation that is both rotation and translation. So yeah, that's a trade-off for sure. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
It was about the ribbon. Just to know what kind of object is it?
Yeah.
Is it bendable or?
No, I simply used one edge loop of the actual mesh and extracted that, so I have the exact position of the lip as the ribbon guide. So it's not a fancy curve or anything. It's just a weighted geometry, and that has been used as like.
And you constrain with?
It uses a location constraint based on the vertex group. So you can just select one single vertex, and that will then be the pointer for the individual bones. Yeah, relatively simple in that sense. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I saw that you have a multiple, like a nomenclature for your bone groups, like global, local, micro. Could you share a bit about what you think this is?
Okay, that part is, was it? Yeah. So the question is about bone groups and why I use specific names for specific bone groups and how to. That is not final. So that was mainly, I would say, an initial setup, where as an animator I like to block in global controls and then turn on local controls and then go into micro controls, so to speak. So it's more of a animation workflow rather than a rigging distribution. So, yeah.
So if I follow up to this question, you have an LTC bone group. What is that?
Yes, the question is like, there's an LTC bone group. What is that? LTC stands for lattice. So the lattices that are hooked up to bones are a separate group, just for my own sanity. Anybody else? Yep.
Speaking about the ribbon, how do you achieve that the rig itself is deformed by the ribbon, but then the ribbon itself is deformed by the rig without dependency looping?
Yeah, that's. How does that even work? Let me see if I can. Let me repeat the question first, and then meanwhile I'll think about it. The question is, how does the ribbon is deformed by the rig, but it's also deforming the mesh itself, and how does that not create a dependency cycle? The bones that are guiding the ribbon are not attached, like they're not in the same hierarchy as the deformed bones on the mesh. So the control bones are only deforming the ribbon, and that is the way to separate those two and avoid that dependency cycle. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for attending.